So a bit of a shock to the NBA world. Shams Charania and Adrian Wojnarowski both announcing that Joel Embiid has suffered a meniscus injury. Now, either of them, there was conflicting reports about either a tear or just an injury. But either way, big loss for the 76ers, for the reigning MVP. Really, really tough news for their prospects out east. Noel, initial reactions.
Definitely not a video I wanted to make or a topic that I wanted to be talking about or even thought that we were going to be talking about. I saw the clip where Jonathan Kuminga fell on him when the 76ers were playing the Warriors back on Tuesday nights. And I mean, just thinking about the past couple of days where you saw that he had missed a couple games with a sore knee, when you saw that he wasn't really looking like himself after that 70-point game, it was scary to see in the moment, but I didn't think that we were going to have another very serious lower leg injury like Joel Embiid was accustomed to early into his career. And just seeing the type of season that he's had and how he's been able to catapult the Philadelphia 76ers and keep them at the top of the Eastern Conference despite all the offseason and preseason drama with James Harden. It's just super unfortunate to see. Like I always tell you, Caleb, injuries, the worst thing to happen in sports, unfortunately. They're just never going to be avoidable, but I mean, we're just entering February, and to think we're starting the month off with only about a week and a half until the trade deadline, and so many teams still out in the open with a ton of question marks. You hate to see the MVP favorite go down with the injury like this.
Yeah, definitely the MVP favorite, like you mentioned, and he's been better than he was last season, averaging close to 35 points a game, over 10 rebounds, getting his passing chops up. We'd like to see that 6 assists a game as well, close to 2 blocks on top of that. So it's not just the offensive responsibility, carrying the load without James Harden, although Tyrese Maxey has stepped up very admirably in his place. But you can't replace an MVP level guy, and like you mentioned, he was hobbling around for the past couple games. He's been in and out. Some people accuse him of ducking Nikola Jokic as he missed the game against the Nuggets.
It's ridiculous.
And
I hate when people say that.
I do too, just because, I mean, if a guy's hurt, the guy's hurt. And clearly we saw that against the Warriors, where it really wasn't comfortable for us to see his knee and how his legs didn't really hold up. And obviously the injury to end that game, super unfortunate for them. But for him, a guy that seems to care about individual accolades a lot, he's talked about winning the MVP last season and how he felt Nikola Jokic's second one in 2022. He felt that award was his. One has to wonder what these new rules for the NBA have done to sort of players' mentality. I know that Tyrese Halliburton's talked about that 65 game requirement for both All NBA and MVPs, consideration at the end of the year. And a lot of players aren't necessarily happy about it. And maybe this is some of the effects of that ruling on some of those award considerations. What say you, Noel? Do you think that Joel Embiid maybe pushed through an injury he shouldn't have just because he really did want to push for that All NBA and MVP consideration?
Yeah, I definitely think that this was the case of him trying to push through maybe when he shouldn't have, and maybe not listening to team doctors and not taking their advice and their criteria here, because you can't blame the guy outside of just stacking up accolades and getting that second straight MVP. Being able to be named MVP and make All NBA also adds a ton of money to these players' pockets. There's strict incentives in players' contracts when they sign these max extensions or these max contracts that they have to get certain achievements throughout the season if they want to get the majority of their money and get generational wealth for their family. So, like I said, on top of him being the best player in the NBA and getting that respect for getting all these awards, he also wants to make money. He wants to get the majority of his contract, and he wants, to rightfully so, make good on the production that he has on the court. So, yeah, you take a look at this very controversial new rule that the NBA implemented, that in order to be eligible for the MVP and be eligible for all NBA teams and be eligible for all these big NBA awards, you have to play at least 65 games in the season. You have to be available for around 80% of the season for your team. And I mean, over the past couple of weeks, that was the big talk around town, was that Joel Embiid, he was kind of already shedding into his tickets, his tickets into how many games he could miss, and he was already kind of stacked them up. And people were thinking like, damn, like, if he kind of continues on this trajectory, he's not going to be eligible for MVP when, like me and you were talking about, he's the clear-cut favorite. I was making an argument for SGA earlier in the season, but Caleb, I mean, you got to take your victory lap here because you were telling me you're like the dude has been even better than he was in last year's MVP campaign. And Tyrese Maxey, he's been amazing. Tobias Harris, he's been fulfilling his role. Kelly Oubre Jr. came back from his own incident off the court, and he's looked great. The entire team has really, really been able to gel, and they've been having a lot more fun ever since Harden got traded to the Clippers, and they brought in more wing depth. But it's also been largely due because of Joel Embiid. He has been awesome all around. He's been scoring the ball more efficiently than he ever has. He's been scoring at all three levels, and the dude is still a beast on defense. So I mean, you take a look at not just him wanting to get that MVP award, not just him wanting to cash in on this money, but like he also sees that he's aging and he wants the teams to be as deadly as they can be heading into this second stretch of the season where they're hopefully going to be trying to overtake the Celtics and overtake the Milwaukee Bucks and kind of put themselves in position to finally make, I mean, not even an NBA Finals, at least an Eastern Conference Finals. So yeah, I definitely do think that this was a case where he looked at everything that was going around with his team, everything that was going around with his own situation, and he thought, I have a lot more to lose, unfortunately, than I do to gain when it comes to not playing. So, yeah, I think he just went for it. And unfortunately, it reminds me a lot of Kevin Durant back in the 2019 playoffs when we saw his calf like shimmy really, really badly. And in that moment, a lot of people could say, like, man, that looks like his Achilles was dropping right there. And then, not too long later, he ended up actually tearing that Achilles. Luckily, Joel Embiid didn't tear an ACL. He didn't, do anything that's going to require any major surgery where he's going to be sitting out the season. I believe right now he's projected to miss around 2 months, which is still a lot of time. But I mean, hopefully he's able to get the treatment that he needs. Like I said, he's had these type of lower body injuries before, especially earlier in his career. So yeah, he just needs to follow that regimen, and hopefully Tyrese Maxey and the rest of the gang can hold it down. But I mean, Caleb, I know that you're a guy that's been waiting for some big, big trades to happen. And the Philadelphia 76ers, the big question with them was, should they even make a move? This team has been doing amazing. And it seems like after Pascal Siakam got traded to the Pacers, really the only bigger names on the market are scoring guards. You have someone like a Zach LaVine, someone like a DeJounte Murray, two guys that the 76ers have been linked to. My question for you, Caleb, is now that Embiid is projected to miss all this time, should Philly go all in on getting a guy that can keep that scoring load? Because, I mean, not even counting assists, that's just 35 points per game that you're going to be missing when Embiid is gone.
Yeah, big loss in the scoring category for sure. I mean, 35 points, that's nothing to sneeze at. He's leading the league there as a center, and that's the second time in a row that he's doing that. So, I mean, like we mentioned before, he's been better than his previous MVP season, but they're not going to have that production. And, with that move, I know that a lot of people around the NBA have said that Zach LaVine's market isn't necessarily great, both with that undesirable contract and maybe his skill set not necessarily meshing with, someone that you would want on the defensive side of the ball, someone who could definitely fill up the basket. But again, I think Philly now pivoting towards that where you want to remain afloat, because keep in mind, the Cavs and the Knicks have been on a impressive tear. The Cavs have done it mainly without Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Both been hurt. They just recently came back, but Donovan Mitchell's been holding down the fort. Their bench production's been doing super well, including a 40-point blowout against the Bucks, which not the best game for me. Giannis was out for that game, but watching that game, not great. And then the Knicks, they're on a 9-game win streak. Jalen Brunson just put up 40 on the day that he finally got announced officially as an All-Star reserve. First time for him. Very exciting stuff. But for Philly, I mean, you have the core there. Tyrese Maxey, also first-time All-Star mentioned officially tonight. He's putting up 25, 3, and 6 in the games that Joel Embiid has missed as a clear number one option for Philly. And tonight, I think, continue that trend with 51 against the Jazz for a narrow 3-point victory. Very impressive stuff from him. You have Tobias Harris, who, without Joel Embiid, I know in a game against the Kings, he did super well, stepping into that second option role. And overall in the season without Embiid, he's putting up 21, 6, and 3. The obvious replacement for him on the roster to fill in that center spot, Paul Reed. Without Embiid, he's averaging 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists. And he also put up 30 and 13 in that game that he missed against Denver, where people thought, Embiid was ducking him. But Paul Reed filled in admirably there against Jokic. And like you mentioned, Kelly Oubre getting healthy from that car accident that he had earlier in the season. He's still putting up 13 points a game after what was it, a 20-point season in Charlotte the
Yep.
previous season? So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, for the Knicks and the Cavs, I mean, they've been on a surge. The Cavs have done it without their guys, and the Knicks have obviously been super, super well balanced with OG Anunoby uh, on a trade. And I think Philly should definitely make a move because in the previous 4 games before tonight, they'd lost all 4. And this is coming after Joel Embiid's 70-point game he dropped on Wemby and the Spurs. But since then, I mean, losses to the Warriors in a close game where Kuminga obviously fell on his leg. 26-point loss to the Blazers, ugly, ugly loss. And I mean, they're not the only ones in the East that had an ugly loss to the Blazers. As the Bucks also suffered a narrow loss there, and Dame's return to Portland. But yeah, I mean, maybe we finally see Zach LaVine to Philly. I think that is a move that makes sense to me. You don't have a lot of money on the books for next season. Obviously, you have to hammer out a extension for Tyrese Maxey, but other than that, I believe the only 2 people under contract for Philly are Joel Embiid and Paul Reed. So
Yep.
bringing Zach LaVine in there, you get Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, some of these other guys off the books, maybe a Nick Batum in there, and the rest of that draft capital that you got from the James Harden trade. I think that scoring punch should definitely at least it helps the Sixers stay afloat for home court in the East because you want to stay in that top 4, if not the top 6 above that play-in range.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of interesting points. And I mean, the most important thing for Philly, like you said, is just to kind of stay consistent. I don't think anybody expects them to be as good as they've been without Joel Embiid. So there's that. But you take a look at the rest of the Eastern Conference. You have the Indiana Pacers who made that trade for Pascal Siakam. Like you said, you have the New York Knicks who are on a roll right now ever since they landed OG Anunoby. You have the Orlando Magic who, shout out first-time All-Star Paolo Banchero, just got named today as well. They're on their own roll. They have a young core who comes hard, plays hard every single day. The Brooklyn Nets, who pretty much the merchant for all the best role players in the NBA, who either take some bad losses or can take out a really good team in the league. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of question marks around a lot of the teams in the Eastern Conference. But the last thing that Philly wants to do is kind of fall behind the pack when Joel Embiid is out. And then he has to come back and he's not able to ease his way back in. Maybe he risked another injury when he gets back by trying to do too much. So, I mean, hopefully Tyrese Maxey continues doing what he can do. Hopefully Paul Reed and Mo Bamba are able to hold down the fort down low in the post. So it's going to be super, super interesting. But yeah, that Zach LaVine move, that does look like the one that I think a lot of Philly fans were looking at early in the season and kind of didn't want to do it because you saw how Tyrese Maxey was taking on the ball handling role and he was taking on a lot of the scoring punch that James Harden left over, and he was doing well. So the biggest question was, why are you going to take the ball out of Tyrese Maxey's hands if it's not going to Joel Embiid or it's not going to a spot-up shooter? Zach LaVine, he's someone who, yeah, he shoots really good from 3 on a good amount of volume attempts, but this season, the Chicago Bulls have looked better when he is off the court. Obviously, he came back recently. He's been able to kind of pick up where he left off. But, I mean, when he left Kobe White, he started taking over. He started really showing that same flash that a lot of people saw when he was first coming out of college. And you have Alex Caruso, who he plays really, really hard on both ends. And, for as athletic and as quick as Zach LaVine is, that's always been the one knock on his game that he did. He can move laterally very well. He gets lost in pick and rolls. He doesn't get back all the time. So I do think that Chicago hasn't been the best culture for someone like a Zach LaVine ever since they started experiencing injuries and a lot of their players aging. I don't think that it's a fair testament that people just write him off as a star that can't contribute to winning. I do think that he'd be a really good 3rd or 4th option, especially with a Joel Embiid back in the lineup. But the big challenge will be for LaVine to, contribute and keep that winning culture that Philly has been seeing these past few months with Joel Embiid playing MVP level basketball. But I mean, Caleb, you already touched on Zach LaVine as kind of like that number 1 target. Do you think there's anybody else on the market right now that Philly could look after, maybe even a smaller deal? I know Malcolm Brogdon is someone that I think could help a lot of contenders. The skill set is kind of similar with Tyrese Maxey, but I think that would be kind of a nice combo guard right there. But anybody else that you have in mind besides Zach LaVine?
I mean, someone else that I might think of, if Chicago truly wants to, fully embrace the youth movement, move forward with Kobe White and Patrick Williams, why not go after Nikola Vucevic? I mean, pretty manageable contract. I believe he's only making 20 mil, and I mean, Philly definitely has the expiring salary to get there. Now, granted, the fit with Embiid would be a bit tough, and it'd be a bit short-sighted if you were only to move a guy that's over 30 for only this season and essentially 2 months, given that Embiid should be healthy for the playoffs, hopefully. But, just spitballing out there, maybe a Vucevic. I mean, you mentioned DeJounte Murray, you mentioned a Malcolm Brogdon. If it's not going to be like a high level scoring guard, because the way I see that those two fit in, they seem more like primary ball handlers and at the point guard position anyway. For me, Zach LaVine, yes, he's going to command some usage from Tyrese Maxey, but I do believe in a more off-ball scoring role as he's done opposite DeMar DeRozan in his Chicago career. I think that could definitely serve them better than, let's say, a one guard. So Zach LaVine is the only one for me, and maybe a wild card if Chicago truly wants to go, out of their way to trade him away. I know that possibly Nicholas Claxton is another option. I know that Brooklyn has floated his name in trade rumors, possibly, and with their sort of fire sale where they're outside of playing range and they maybe want a higher draft pick, they could definitely ship off Claxton. What it's going to take to get him as sort of a young asset, pretty good defender. Not too sure, but maybe Vucevic, maybe Claxton as a true replacement big. If you don't necessarily feel confident with Paul Reed and Mo Bamba, if you're Philly.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting too. That would be pretty crazy if they try to target a bigger man to give themselves even more front court depth. I know they had pretty much three centers before Montrezl Harrell went down with that knee injury in the preseason. So it'll be super, super interesting to see how Philly kind of approaches the situation. We're probably going to get more details exactly what Joel Embiid is going through this weekend when he gets his treatment. Like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty about whether this is even a meniscus tear or what's going on. It's always some level of secrecy with these star players in the NBA. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But pivoting over to All-Star, we just got the results. We got the reserves, a lot of first-timers in there, good amount of regular faces that we're accustomed to seeing. But, I mean, as we all know, Joel Embiid, he was set to start in the game for the Eastern Conference. And now, obviously, he's more than likely not going to be able to play. So, Caleb, is there a certain guy you're looking at to take that starting spot from him? I don't think there's any official rules that say it has to be the center. So, maybe New York is going to push for Mr. Jalen Brunson to get in there. But what do you think?
I mean, Jalen Brunson's already in. He had a
As a
really
starter,
great. Yeah, as a starter. I mean, I think they would put Bam in that situation, as like seeing as he's the only center there as that reserve. But I mean, for a guy to replace him, I was really surprised that Trae Young didn't even make the cut. I really don't understand it. What like coaches don't see, what fans. I
They
mean,
just
the
don't
fans
like him.
clearly
Yeah,
like him.
Trae is someone that just like the NBA community over time just doesn't like.
Yeah, for whatever reason. And for me, as a guy who saw how great he was in 2021, going up against the Bucks, if he didn't get hurt, honestly, Atlanta could have won that series too. But I mean, he took down the Sixers uh, through 7 games, destroyed the Knicks, took a bow in the center of MSG. So I mean, Trae Young is the obvious guy for me. I mean, he's putting up 28 points and 11 assists, that's second in the NBA. I mean, not necessarily the most efficient scorer. And yes, the Hawks aren't necessarily high up in like the records or like the Eastern Conference standings, but yeah, for a guy that is putting up that statistical level of production, and especially for the argument that you want to make for Anthony Davis making it in as the ninth seed for the Lakers, you know, LeBron was going to get in regardless, just as voted as the starter, most popular player in the league. We get all that. That's a given. But
Yeah.
to have Anthony Davis in there and not to put Trae Young in there, I just really don't understand what the coaches are doing. So, I mean, Trae Young would definitely be my pick to be like the number one replacement, the sort of understudy for Joel Embiid, as he's set to miss this game.
Same here. Yeah, the dude, he's like I said, putting up damn near 30 points and double-digit assists every single game. There's been a lot of tension. There's been a lot of circus acts in Atlanta over the past couple of seasons since they made that run to these conference finals. So I do see why, like I said, the NBA community doesn't really appreciate his game. But at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. The dude is hooping, like always, hooping through all the trade rumors. DeJounte Murray is more than likely going to get moved. So we're going to see how Atlanta is going to build around Trae, Jalen Johnson, and Big O. So hopefully he gets back on the radar and he starts getting that respect back. And I do 100% agree with you, Caleb, that I want to see his name back in the All-Star lineups. And hopefully he's back over in Indiana with the rest of the guys because he deserves it. He's hooping all the time. But, I mean, hopefully, most of all, Joel Embiid gets healthy. Hopefully whatever treatment, whatever procedure he undergoes this weekend is successful. And let's see what Philly is going to do. Like you said, they can't stay stagnant. They can't fall behind in the standings with how uncertain the Eastern Conference is right now, what teams could jump up. So it's going to be super, super interesting. Caleb, my man, thank you for joining me today for a little topic change. We got that Joel Embiid news and just super sad to see. But thank you for joining me, my man.
Sad to see, but happy to be here.
100%, bro. And you guys have a good rest of your day. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, comment down below any other topics you want to see us talk about. Have a good rest of your day.